Legio Enigmatum, Part 8. The drop pod struck the earth like the hammer of a god, throwing up a plume of scorched dust and shattering the unbroken golden grasslands. The savannah groaned beneath the impact, birds scattering from the canopies around, and the cracked shell of the pod hissed and whined as cooling systems fought to keep the vessel from becoming a tomb. Inside, Decius Thorne was knocked unconscious by the impact. A few minutes of contrasting stillness followed, and then the drop pod, reliant on automatic procedures, blew the hatches. It was intended as a means of allowing an injured marine out, but on the savannah the spectacle was unimpressive and only watched by circling birds. Circles of birds and a single servo skull, which raced towards the pod from a passenger craft above. Decius awoke in pain and in silence. His vision blurred, his ears rang with the phantom thunder of the drop. His body ached where the inertial dampeners had failed to fully compensate. Without a battle suit, a drop pod was a brutal way to arrive upon a world. The air was so hot, immensely hot, and bright beyond the pod's cracked viewport. After a few moments he realized the dull whine that he could hear was not damaged eardrums, but a small grav generator. He looked around and saw the servo skull, seemingly inspecting a wound on his shoulder blade. "Get off," he swiped at the thing. It withdrew, and before he could stand and grab it, shot out of the empty hatch and into the air. "Mechanicus," Decius growled, feeling around on his back. He could feel a small cut in the bodysuit. It was one of many inflicted by the landing. Decius staggered to his feet. His muscles were bruised, but his bones were unbroken. It was repair his space marine physiology would make short work of. He emerged. His eyes could just peck out the servo skull, whizzing higher and higher into the air, until it disappeared into the hull of a Mechanicus transport. The transport hovered for a moment, as if to taunt Decius, then flew back into the atmosphere. "Bastards," Decius muttered. He looked around himself. Despite his anger, he had to consider what a world Elysium was. The plain stretched in every direction like an ocean of gold and copper. Sun-resistant grasses rolled in great rippling waves across the undulating hills. The movement picked up in rich hues. The air shimmered with dry heat. Here and there, the broken copse of ancient, petrified trees jutted from the earth, silver-grey, twisted by time, beautiful in their death. In other places, small oases flourished, their own hidden underground springs still running, nourishing the plants. The sound of chirruping, hardy insects was everywhere. Above, the sun rode high, young and strong, casting clean shadows and bathing the world in a warm, honest light. For a long moment Decius said nothing. He simply breathed. The filtered, sterile air of the echo of lament was gone. Here the air was full of life. Earth, dust, wind. "I'm alive," he muttered, shielding his eyes. He allowed himself a moment to comprehend what had happened. Cast out of his chapter for challenging its master, his fists clenched, making the bodysuit glove groan. He wondered where he had been banished to. He turned in a slow circle, orientating himself. There was no landmark he recognized, no spires, no plumes of smoke, no signs of civilization. But he remembered the planet's solar arc, and remembered his librarium cartography lessons. The sun's angle told him enough. Southern hemisphere, mid-afternoon. And far, far in the distance, on the farthest rim of the visible world, he saw the jagged peaks of a mountain range. The foothills, he knew, would be his best bet. More shade, more water, maybe even a settlement if he was lucky. The tribes of Elysium IX often built at the edges of the mountains, where water flowed and beasts roamed. He looked down at his undersuit. It clung to him like a burial shroud, already soaked in sweat. It was too hot. He peeled it off and threw it over his shoulder. The nights on Elysium were as cold as the days were hot. He would need it later. He began to walk. Through the day and into the edge of twilight, he marched, long strides across tall grass, boots crunching the dry soil beneath. Shadows stretched out behind him, long and slender, cast by that noble sun. As the light dimmed to orange, then magenta, then violet, he paused beneath the stunted skeleton of one of the old trees and nestled, reclining on a rock still warm from the day's passage. He thought of the lions, of Koja and his voice like thunder, of Zahari's obsidian stare, of Librarian Kerbe's silence. He thought of the matadors, of Malric's fury, of Calbron's sorrow, and of the things they now carried in their hull. Even now he felt no shame for his challenge. He hoped that in time he would not come to be the last loyal son of the matador's patient. An hour passed. The stars came out in slow waves. He rose again and walked. The night was cold. The wind shifted. Elysium's moons rose, one full and serene, the other jagged and a crescent of blood. He drank in the starlight, walking with purpose. His thirst rose with the moons, his tongue dried in his mouth, his lips cracked. He moved more slowly now, head bowed, eyes scanning the grass for signs of damp. And then salvation, a depression in the land, ringed with low stones and reed grass, a watering hole. He nearly fell into it in his haste, dropping to his knees and scooping the cold, fresh water to his mouth in great, desperate handfuls. It tasted of moss and minerals and life. He drank until his stomach cramped. Then he looked up. Across the pool, maybe 60 meters away, in the shadow of the tall reeds, it stood, a predator, immense. Its shape was hard to discern, a great-bodied thing with eyes that caught the starlight and reflected it coldly in a deep red hue. It made no noise, it only watched, still, patient, like a statue carved from obsidian and hunger. Without his coal-forged eyes, he would not have seen it. He imagined the beast thought itself hidden. Decius rose, slowly. Some millennium-ingrained instinct told him to remain still, but he did not. He was a space marine, and he had no fear of the things that hunted at night. He walked away, not backwards, not quickly, just away. The creature did not appear to follow, just watched him. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and pitiless. Decius walked beneath them, bare-chested, the cold air raising goose-flesh across his skin, dust clinging to his boots and his calves. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from weariness, but from the weight inside his chest. He put on his bodysuit, and it took the bite from the cold. He thought of the echo of lament gliding in orbit far above. His brothers were there, men he had bled beside, men he had trusted with his life, and they had welcomed evil into their hold. Decius clenched his jaw. "This is how it begins," he muttered aloud again. Not with oaths broken in fire, but in silence, in its secrets. He could still see Malric's gauntlet resting firm upon the war table in the Lion's Gate. These shards will never darken the Emperor's domain again, the Black Anvil had sworn. But hadn't they already? The bust, assembled, screaming, hollow-eyed, was no longer merely a relic of terror. It was a symbol now, a monument, and his brothers, however noble, had chosen to keep it, chosen to carry it with them. The bust that somehow, inextricably, bore resemblance to the chapter that kept it. "Pride," Decius whispered. "It'll be our undoing." He stopped walking and turned his gaze skyward, his voice low and rough. "I would have died with you," he said, "but I will not fall with you." And then he kept walking. The mountains were several days away still. 2 days passed. Decius learnt quickly to move in rhythm with the world. He walked in the early mornings when the air still carried a whisper of cool from the night. When the sun climbed high and the heat made the earth shimmer, he made to find shade, and he would find it beneath petrified trunks or sun-hardened trees, or he would dig into the cooler dirt beneath the plains grass and rest. When the evening came, lit by Elysium's twin moons, one bone-white, the other dusty red, he walked again. The moons taught him time. The pale one rose shortly after dusk and passed quickly. The red one lingered through the deepest hours and gave the landscape a strange, bruised hue. When both were visible, he had learnt, the wind would bite more fiercely. When neither were visible, it meant rare cloud and a pleasant humidity. Always he was watched. From the moment he had left the watering hole on the first evening, Decius had known he was being stalked. A shape, large and low-slung, kept distance in the tall grass, black and lean. It never came close enough to be seen clearly, but Decius could feel it, a presence more than a shape, eyes that burned low and quiet like coals, always watching. He did not fear it, but it was a beast that knew no territory, and that spoke of its power. With the long, healthy limb of a tree and sharpened bones of a scavenger's carcass, he fashioned a spear. Crude but balanced, he stalked a herd of four-legged grazers, beasts with lean flanks and spiraled horns, their hides marked in bars of slate and cream. He waited until one stood slightly apart from the herd. He threw the spear through its shoulders with the precision of a hunter born, then thanked the Emperor for his meal as the animal thrashed and fell. He had seen the lions do this as a sign of respect for the life taken. The meat tasted gamey and strong, and it gave him strength. On the third night he climbed a small escarpment of stone to sleep above the wavering grasses and prowling dark. He wrapped himself in a ragged half-cloak made from the beast's hide and leaned back to watch the stars. That's when he saw the ignition. Bright points flaring in the sky, first one, then a dozen, lances of artificial fire streaking across the upper atmosphere, too fast and coordinated to be meteors. The Matador's patient fleet. Decius sat up. The formation was deliberate. They weren't maneuvering or repositioning, they were leaving. Their engines flared brighter, aligning with eerie precision. They were racing for a translation point. Decius stared until the last of the drive signatures faded to pinpricks, and then they were gone. He said nothing, only breathed. He was truly marooned, truly cast out. He did not know whether he was saved from a fallen brotherhood or damned for his refusal to follow orders. He had not expected them to abandon orbit so quickly. There had been no warning, no communication, no ceremony. And then another ship's engines flared. The Mechanicus ship raced across to the horizon, making for its own translation point, and disappeared. "What frightens you all?" wondered Decius aloud. Then, in the silence left by the departure, a new star rose. It did not fall or burn, but appeared sudden, deliberate and vast, a single ship larger than any of the Matador's vessels, sleek, silver-black, with beacon lights that swept the planet's surface like silent judgment. Even from here, Decius knew what it was, with its cathedral-like command bastion and brutal prow, an Inquisition vessel. He sat on the stone for a long time. So, Malric had fled with his cursed treasures. The moment the long-range augurs detected the Inquisition's approach, the Matadors had bolted, fleeing into the void. He knew their argument. It had passed through his mind time and time again as he walked the plains. Every time he came to the same conclusion. The Matadors had placed themselves at great risk. Their motives were pure enough, but the road to hell was paved with good intentions. The lions would be left behind, caught in the Inquisition's gaze, just as the Night Lords had hoped. They had laid out paths that only seemed to lead to ruin. Far behind him, somewhere in the swaying golden grass, the shadow moved closer. The wind had shifted. Decius could feel it now, rising from the directions of the mountain in long, cool drafts. It smelled of stone and moisture, tinged faintly with something floral, perhaps blooming brush in the highlands. The land around him had softened with elevation. The great plains stretched wide behind him. The sky was a vault of indigo. The moons were high. He began walking again. Soon he stopped counting the days. Time had become the feel of wind on his skin, the ache in his calves, the dryness of his tongue in the morning before he found a watering hole again. The meat he had cured was gone. He would need to hunt again soon. And always, always he was not alone. The creature still followed. It was quiet, cunning, and patient, never closing the distance, never revealing itself fully, only glimpsed in the grass, a shape outlined in heat haze, a low breath on the wind. Sometimes he turned suddenly, and he thought he saw the curve of black shoulders or the glint of wet, red eyes. It was stalking him, testing him, waiting perhaps for him to falter or tire. Decius did not falter, but he was tired, and he was beginning to feel it, the deep sadness. It came without warning, a heaviness beneath his ribs, a hollowing, the kind of sorrow only known to those who were exiled by those they once loved. He remembered training with them, bleeding beside them, serving the Emperor beside them, and now he was alone beneath an alien sky, abandoned by those very same men. Above him, the Inquisition ship still hung in the sky, day after day. It never moved, always holding position above the equator, like a great, brooding eye. No lander had descended that Decius had seen. It simply watched, its presence a constant threat, as if the planet itself was being weighed up against the scales of exterminatus. He feared one evening soon to see the telltale signatures of descending cyclonic torpedoes, falling like silver spears towards the horizon. If that happened, there would be no escape. And he continued walking. He could be 1,000 miles from the nearest human soul. He had no vox, no beacon, no armor, no hope of rescue. And still, from the tall grass behind him, the predator watched. That night, Decius decided to have a fire. The nights were getting colder the closer he came to the mountains. The fire cast long shadows, but it failed to penetrate the darkness of the night. But Decius's eyes were sharper than most men's, and when the creature stepped into the firelight, he saw it fully. It was a lion, but no lion he had ever known. It was massive, coated in black fur so dark it seemed to drink the light. Its mane was heavy and dreadlocked, hanging in thick cords down from its shoulders. Its eyes were amber, steady and ancient. Scars stripped its flank like old battle honours. Decius knew its name. The inhabitants of the planet called it Tecatu, the sacred lion of Elysium, spoken of in myths of the ancient tribes. Spirit guardians, judges of worth, executioners of the weak. It had come to test him. The creature did not roar, but it did charge. Decius moved instinctively, hurling himself sideways as it barreled through the fire, sending sparks and embers scattering. The spear caught it as it passed, but the blow was glancing. The shaft shattered against its chest with the crack of splintering wood. Then the beast was on him. It struck like a thunderclap. The weight of it drove him to the ground. The claws raked down. Long, clean cuts opened across his chest, hot blood welling instantly. His breath fled from all three of his lungs in a gasp as he struggled beneath the weight, and then its jaws descended. His hands seized the jaws. He was strong, but the jaws of the Tecatu were stronger still. He pushed against them, veins bulging, muscles screaming, trying to force them apart, to break the animal's jaw, but the maw was like iron, its breath hot, and rank, its teeth pressing closer with every heartbeat. With a grunt of pain and fury, Decius wrenched his hands free and rolled hard to the side. He kicked out with both legs, shoving the lion back, just long enough to rise to his knees. Then it leapt. Decius rolled sideways, his arms came up, and he wrapped them around the thing's throat from behind, hands clasped tight, elbows pulling up. The beast bucked like a mad thing, spinning and slamming its weight into the ground, trying to dislodge him. Decius held on. His twin hearts pumped harder than he had ever known them to. It was like a war drum beating the competition between man and beast. He squeezed, his biceps burning. The lion thrashed, snarling, its paws tearing at the earth. For long minutes they wrestled in the dust and smoke of the broken fire, predator against predator, strength against strength. Decius thought he could feel the artificial fibres inlaid in his muscles fraying and snapping. Then, with a low, thunderous groan, the Tikatu collapsed. It was not dead. Decius could still feel the faint heartbeat in the powerful arteries of the thing's neck. But that beat was slowing. The thing was beaten. Decius lay panting, half his body pinned below the beast. Sweat and blood mingled on his chest. The wounds had already closed, thanks to his space marine physiology, but the blood was still warm and wet. Slowly, carefully, he released his hold and stepped back. The lion lay there, defeated, and as sombre as a reprimanded dog. Then it rose to its feet with slow dignity. They regarded each other in silence, warrior and beast, both bleeding, both alive. Decius picked up the part of his spear that bore the bone tip and held it at his side. He took a single step back and lowered his eyes, not in submission, but in respect. The Tikatu growled once, a deep, resonant sound. Then it turned and vanished into the grass. As he stood alone once more, Decius touched the blood drying on his chest and whispered a phrase he had learned from a plainsman during his time on the planet. He who walks with the Tikatu walks with the world. The plainsman believed the beasts to be the guardians and the keepers of natural order and balance. It would have been a great sin to kill one, but Decius wondered if he had just let an enemy go. Thank you for listening. I try and release a new episode every Sunday afternoon, so please tune in next week for the next installment. Please comment and subscribe, and try and share this audiobook about so that it can gain a bit of traction. I'm really keen to hear what the fans think of the production of the story so far, and where they think it'll go. In the future, I'm hoping that Legio Enigmatum will answer some of the big questions in the lore, but I'm really keen to hear where you think the story should head.